Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champions? Welcome in. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. Hopefully, you had a wonderful Labor Day weekend where you drafted your brains out.
We definitely did.
Rick, I had 3 drafts on Labor Day, and my head kind of hurts at this point.
You had 3 drafts within about a 3-hour span, right?
Yeah, it is
2 hour?
absurd. But I now have teams, so that's good.
Yeah, isn't it fun to just stare at your own team for 2 hours?
Oh my god, I legitimately for like 2-3 hours just stared at my freaking sleeper app, researching my own players, trying to solidify the fact that my picks were good.
Yeah,
I'm like
I kind of did the same thing.
Somebody confirm that this was a good idea, please. Other than myself.
The night of the draft, I went home and I just kind of looked at the team.
But so the only thing that's left now is a real NFL football game, which happens Thursday night. We are recording this on Tuesday. I don't know when it gets launched, so all the power to you. Hopefully the information that you get is prior to week 1. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about players that you need to pick up before week 1. And we'll talk about what that means in a second, and then some trade targets for week 1. I think we're going to do some trade targets for week 1, and then for the rest of the season, we'll do a buy and sell show, and give you 3 players to buy, 3 players to sell, for the week. Okay. Before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like and comment down below any questions you have for us. Rick, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay, doing okay.
How was the trip back up to your homestead?
It was fine.
Was that this morning?
Lots of traffic, lots of rain, yeah. So it was kind of balls, but it's okay. I was actually listening.
It depends on who you are, because I would find that relatively relaxing.
It is and it isn't, because it's one thing for rain. It's another thing for it to be downpouring and you're in traffic.
That's true. That seems painful.
Yeah. So, but I'm here. So,
all right. Well, let's get started without further ado, and start off with our players to add before week 1. Now, the goal with these players, obviously we're going to give you week 2 waiver wires, but we're going to give you waiver wire targets each week following the week. But for this episode, and maybe we'll do it on the other shows, players that you should pick up prior to your draft, or not prior to your draft, pick players that you should pick up prior to the next week.
Right.
But for this show, we're going to talk about players that you should add from the waiver wire before week 1 even begins. Guys that could have a big week 1 performance, could explode onto the scene and become players that people just dump 70% of their waiver budget for.
Exactly.
And then you're like,
every year,
sheesh.
Right, every year after week 1, there's at least 1, sometimes 2 or 3 players that somebody's going to dump at least 50% of their waiver budget into.
Yep. So most of the time there is one within the first 3 weeks of the season. And typically I employ the strategy that you frick waiver budget later in the season. The only time I use later in the season waiver budget is for handcuffs or defense streaming.
Yep, me too.
I like to dump my waiver budget in the first month of the season, most of it, and get players that could have a breakout season from the waiver wire. We've seen it before. James Robinson happened a couple years ago.
Yep.
So there's always 1 or 2 guys that do have these kinds of breakouts, but we're going to give you 3 or 4 guys here that you should pick up.
Elijah Mitchell last year too, right?
Oh yeah, Elijah Mitchell last year. But you can get these guys for absolutely free right now, and if we're right, then you don't have to pay $70 70% of your waiver budget, or hope that you get them if you're still doing one of those tiered waiver priorities. Stupid.
Yeah. Have fun with that.
But anyway, so let's start off with that, and then we'll jump into 3 trade targets that we have for players that you should trade for before week 1. We technically could have broken this out into 2 episodes, but why not cram it into one?
Yeah. I mean, it's only 3 players on each, so.
That's true. All right, so the first guy that we have for, and it's exciting. I just realized that we're talking about week 1, which is.
I was just gonna say that.
I freaking love it. But week 1, player 1 that we have here is Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, I want to preface this. We do use Fantasy Pros waiver wire rankings because they give you a owned percentage, so it tells you how many people actually own the player. Right now, according to Fantasy Pros, Rondale Moore is owned in 30.7% of leagues, which I find astounding because I was drafting him in literally every draft in the 13th and 14th round.
Yep.
I'm like, wait a minute. People don't draft Rondale Moore. So if you're like, oh, I drafted Rondale Moore in the 10th round, what are you talking about? I'm like, relax, all right? This is the data I have in front of me.
Apparently, you're the only one that does.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, so I think Rondale Moore is primed for a really, really, really good week 1. There's obviously variables that go along with the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know how long Rondale Moore is going to be relevant on the Arizona Cardinals because you also have Hopkins is out till week 7 or 6.
Yeah, he has 6-game suspension, so week 7.
So he'll be back in week 7, and among other things over in Arizona. So I think that Rondale Moore could quickly become useless by the midway point in the season. If we're being fair, I do think that they can carry 3 wide receivers, but I just think that he's the third guy and he's the odd man left out. Wide receiver 3 status is probably his best outcome. But as the second wide receiver on the Arizona Cardinals, there is some upside for him. He's sitting next to Hollywood Brown. Hollywood's playing this week, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So he's playing. You have Rondale Moore playing on the other side. He's their second receiver. They do like to use him in gadget plays as well. So I think he provides some form of upside. And if he has a big week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs, then everyone's going to flock to the waiver wire. Everyone's going to try to add him, and they're going to dump waiver budget on him. And the time to get him is right now. The only concern I have is that he is somewhat dealing with an injury. So check practice reports and stuff like that prior to week 1. Like, we're not saying pick him up and start him. We're just saying pick him up to make sure you have him before he goes, and has a great week.
Yeah. And he could suck too. I mean, with a lot of these guys, I mean, they're on the waivers because they're on, the waivers. There's a reason for it. But I think Rondale Moore could have a big week 1, and you could take advantage of that. So if you need a roster spot, I would definitely Rondale Moore, probably the first guy I'm looking at. If he's available in your league, as you said, he's going to be the second receiving option. And it's going to be a game against Kansas City where, in all likelihood, it's going to be very high scoring. I think
I agree.
The over-under for that game is like one of the 3 highest for week 1. It's one of the highest over-unders. So it should be a high-scoring game. There's going to be a lot of targets to go around for Kyler Murray in that Arizona offense. Hollywood Brown will get a lot, but there's still going to be plenty to go around. And there's a chance Zach Ertz doesn't play either, which would leave even more targets available. And apparently there's reports, too, that Rondale Moore has been used in the backfield. So he could realistically, in PPR, have a pretty good week. You could get ahead of the curve there, pick him up, use him for a couple weeks, and then before D-Hop comes back, make a trade.
All right, Rick, tell us who the number 2 guy is.
So our number 2 guy on the list is Mike Davis. It's super gross. Super gross. But there's a real chance J.K. Dobbins does not play in week 1 against the Jets. If that happens, Mike Davis should get a big workload with the Ravens offense. They did just sign Kenyon Drake, so he could have a role, but they signed him this past week. So he's going to probably have a much smaller role than Mike Davis. Mike Davis has been on the team. They have said that if Dobbins is not ready to go, Mike Davis will be the guy. So, again, a super gross player, but it's someone you can take advantage of. If you pick him up before week 1, and Dobbins doesn't play, and this is if you have the roster spot. Obviously, if you got a stacked bench, I'm not recommending this.
Yeah.
But if you have the roster spot, pick up Mike Davis. If Dobbins doesn't play and Davis goes out and gets like 15 to 20 points because he's playing the freaking Jets, then all of a sudden you have this running back that got 15 to 20 points. And then if Dobbins is iffy for week 2, trade him to the team that has J.K. Dobbins for a good bench player.
There you go. That could work. I will say too, like specifically with Mike Davis, if J.K. Dobbins doesn't run, I think it's like ridiculous that we are now like basically full year removed from when the entire running back core for the friggin' Baltimore Ravens got hurt, and they're still having trouble getting on the field.
It's very weird to me that, I mean, I get Gus Edwards because he was later, but I'm very surprised that Dobbins isn't ready to go. He just tore his ACL, right? It was just an ACL tear.
Yeah.
It's been over a year. He tore it in July.
Mike Davis too. Like he's starting the season on the PUP, and it's like Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is starting the season on the PUP, and he got hurt early last year.
Yeah,
we're doing this merry-go-round again. You remember last year when it was Le'Veon Bell and that random Devonta Freeman. Who was the guy that everyone was picking up the undrafted free agent? Do you remember his name?
My gosh, yeah. Tyson Williams, right?
Yeah, something like that. So like everyone jumped on the Baltimore Ravens bandwagon, and obviously they run the ball a lot, so that's what you're gonna see. But Gus is not playing. He's starting the season on the PUP, and J.K. Dobbins might not start week 1. He might not play week 1. So with that being said, I think Mike Davis is a decent add, especially if you shouldn't be thinking this way. Like you shouldn't be desperate at this point in the season. You just drafted your team. Run it out there.
Before week 1, that's kind of a tough spot.
Yeah, I know. Like just unless you're in a dynasty league, I'm like, just play your guys. Like see what happens. If you lose week 1, it is what it is. You can recover from that. Right. But Mike Davis does provide a okay low-end flex floor if J.K. Dobbins does not play. But I would pick him up before week 1 because if you get Mike Davis on your team before week 1 and then he does have a decent week, like Rick said, he gets 10, 12, 15 points in half PPR, then all of a sudden people are going to flock to the waiver wire and be like, all right, well, if J.K. Dobbins doesn't start, they're going to have to dump waiver budget on Mike Davis when you could probably just add him to your roster for free, and if somebody needs a running back or something happens, you can either trade him away or keep him on your roster to use as a low-end flex option for the following week. I don't expect J.K. Dobbins to be out super long if he does miss week 1, but Mike Davis is a decent add as speculation to what the situation is with J.K. Dobbins. Number 3 is Romeo Doubs. Now, this could become completely irrelevant by Friday.
True.
But
this one is
right now, there is no receivers on the Green Bay Packers, even with the starters that they have. Allen Lazard is rumored to be a guy who may not play week 1, and there's a good chance that he doesn't. Christian Watson is also questionable. He is leaning towards playing Sunday. Matt LaFleur said he could play Sunday. So that would be a good thing for Christian Watson because if Allen Lazard's not on the field, Watson can play. But there's a chance that both of these guys don't play. And what that means is Sammy Watkins and Romeo Doubs, whatever you want to say, Doubs is going to be on the field as a starter with Sammy Watkins. And there has been some conversations about Doubs having breakfast with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
He's got his locker next to Rodgers.
Yeah.
There's been some hype around that. I wasn't a proponent of drafting him, but if you have a roster space, this would be the week to add him because everyone post week 1 is going to be searching for that Green Bay Packers wide receiver that's the next Davante Adams. And if Doubs makes an impression in week 1 on Aaron Rodgers, that could be a no turn back moment.
Yes. That's the big thing with I'm going to say Romeo Doubs. I think it's Romeo Doubs.
Let's call him Romeo because it's more fun that way.
First of all, some people will be like, "Oh, what do you mean? He gets drafted like the 10th round." According to Fantasy Pros, he's available in 75% of fantasy leagues. So, yeah, he might have been drafted in the 9th round in your league because your friend watched his preseason highlights. But in most leagues, he went undrafted.
That was good.
So he's probably available in your league.
Yeah.
And yes, that's the thing. If week 1, Watson and Lazard don't play, and Romeo Doubs goes out there and gets like 8 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, he's in. Like Rodgers is going to trust him rest of the season. Yeah. He'll trust him over Watson because that's just how Aaron Rodgers works. He needs to trust the guys.
Yeah.
So if Romeo Doubs gets that opportunity early and capitalizes on it, you just got a home run off the waiver wire. Now, if Lazard and Watson play, I'm a lot less into it.
Yeah.
Because then it just becomes like a crapshoot at wide receiver, and who knows what they're going to do.
It's probably at that point Lazard, it would be Lazard, and Lazard and Watkins probably 1 and 2, and then Christian Watson 3, and Doubs would probably fall out the bottom of the barrel. But
right, and Randall Cobb's still there, but I don't think he's going to be involved.
I forgot he existed.
He's not really though. Like, has the Packers released their official depth chart yet?
Probably.
I'd be interested to see where everybody lines up on there. But Lazard did not practice. The latest that we know, Lazard didn't practice on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not looking good for him. Watson, I think, as you said, a little bit
official
better
depth chart
chance.
On the Packers website right now has Lazard wide receiver 1.
Makes sense.
Watkins wide receiver 2.
Okay.
Romeo Doubs wide receiver 3. And then Christian Watson. Well, I don't know that this is in a particular order, but the second group of wide receivers is
Doubs and Watson. So Cobb is not in the mix, though.
Yeah, Cobb is.
That's what I
way
figured.
Bottom. Well, actually, they have him as a slot receiver as a starter, but Amari Rodgers is the second guy. I forgot he was on the team too.
Yeah, Rodgers is he might get cut the way it's going with him.
Nice. But anyway, yeah. So, but that's one of those situations where you could get Romeo Doubs and he could have an explosive week 1 and do that. So, but I would add him before week 1. The worst case scenario is you just cut him the following week if he doesn't do anything. Honorable mention, Parris Campbell. He is, according to, I'll look it up for you guys, but according to the Colts depth chart, I believe he is the wide receiver 2 officially.
So it's not Alex Pierce season, bro?
No, it would not be Alec Pierce season. But Parris Campbell is, according to their depth chart, the wide receiver 2 on the team. So with that being said, like there's obviously injury concern, but I feel like this is a guy who plays the slot. He's going to be a great dump-off option for Matt Ryan, and I think he's a player that when he's been on the field, he's gotten 7 to 10 targets. So, like, he gets open, he gets the ball. If he stays healthy, I think this is a decent add for your team. He was one of my favorite, like, 15th round, 14th round targets to get on the team. You know, somebody that you can cut if he doesn't end up being good. But if he goes out week 1, gets 7, 8 targets, 80 yards in a PPR league, if he catches 6 passes and he has 60 yards, then all of a sudden you're talking about a really good week 1, and people are like, okay, Parris Campbell, I got to go at him. So I would add him prior to the week 1, hype for him.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to jump into trade targets?
Sure.
All right, tell us the first one, Rick.
The first trade target is kind of in the same boat as Rondale Moore, but it's Hollywood Brown. He's somebody who a lot of guys are either just high on him or they're not. In our league, he kind of fell. But I've seen other leagues where he's like an early 4th round pick.
Yep.
And like I think I saw him late 3rd in one draft. So he can go anywhere from like the 3rd to the 6th. He's kind of all over the place. But I will tell you why he's a trade target. As you probably know, DeAndre Hopkins is suspended those first 6 weeks. So he's going to be the main receiving option for the Cardinals. And Kyler Murray loves to target those top guys. Whether it's Hopkins, even when Hopkins missed time, he would target Christian Kirk, and Kirk would have those big games. And Hollywood just fits the Cardinals system. He's that speed receiver who could have some big plays. His schedule early on in the season, too, in these 6 weeks, are pretty easy. Kansas City's a good matchup. The Vegas Raiders, a good matchup. Rams is kind of tough, but then Panthers, good matchup. Eagles are kind of tough, and then Seahawks, good matchup. So 4 of the 6 games are considered good matchups for Hollywood Brown. So he could take advantage early. I mean, he could really be a low-end wide receiver 1 these first 6 weeks. And you could trade him after those 6 weeks, and some people are going to say, no, you can't because everybody knows when Hopkins comes back. But you'll be surprised. If he's putting up big numbers, there will be arguments saying that he's going to just keep putting up these big numbers, and no, he's just the wide receiver one on the team. I've seen it from other fantasy analysts who believe Hollywood Brown will be the wide receiver one on the team when D-Hop comes back. And if he performs well in those first 6 weeks, it's just going to justify people with those opinions. So I'm sure there's someone in your league that has that opinion, and I would go target that guy afterwards. But in the meantime, target Hollywood Brown before he has this monster start.
Yeah, I think it's just smart too. Obviously, Rick and I both have believed that Hollywood is going to be, or Marquise Brown if you're confused and you don't know his nickname, but that Brown is going to be, regardless of situation, whether Hop is there or not. I do think that Hollywood Brown is going to end up getting a decent target share and have a good season with Arizona, but without DeAndre Hopkins on the field for 6 weeks, Arizona has to throw somebody in their air raid offense. They have to throw somebody the ball.
Yes.
And Hollywood's the best receiver there. And I think that he has a chance to get targeted at a pace of 8, 9, 10 targets a week. And if that's something that happens, then Hollywood instantly becomes a very good value in fantasy football, and he can produce for your team for a couple weeks before Hopkins comes back. But the big thing to me is the trade aspect of it. Obviously, if you don't have him, you can trade for him, and if he's a 5th, 6th round pick in your league or 4th round pick, you can snag Hollywood Brown in a trade pretty easily without people being like, oh, well, this guy's good. He's this guy's a 2nd round pick. I'm not going to trade him. You can actually get Hollywood not spending, not breaking the bank. But then when the time comes 4 weeks into the season, when the draft doesn't matter anymore and Hollywood Brown blows up, right? You can trade Hollywood away for a better running back or to fill a need on your team that you have. And people will buy that because there are people who really love Hollywood Brown. We are some of those people, but there are people who are obsessed with him.
There's people much higher than me on Hollywood Brown.
So it's those people, call them up, give them a trade offer and see what you can get out of them, because if you can get, something really, really good for Hollywood, that's great. So I think it's a smart move. It's a wise move. Try to get Hollywood on your team. Number 2 is Travis Etienne, who I drafted 10 spots, 12 spots, 15 spots.
I think it was ahead. 20, to be honest.
Don't even start.
I projected him.
Don't even start with me.
Or on Sleeper, he was projected to get drafted on my team in the beginning of the 4th round. So
of course.
You took him a full round early.
That's what I do. Get your guys. I was at the turn, by the way.
No, so. Fair.
I was at the turn, so I had to get my guys. I didn't have a choice to play ADP.
I didn't hate the pick. I just didn't like it because I wanted him on my team.
Yeah. See, there it is. But Travis Etienne is a guy who is. It's an interesting situation because I really James Robinson is playing this week, but is he playing?
Exactly.
Is he going to be on the field? And he's a 24-year-old running back, which is not super duper.
Don't pretend to say that's old. That's not old.
It's definitely not old, considering that I'm 6 years older than him. So there's that. But
torn Achilles.
He tore his Achilles. He's an undrafted running back who's at age 24. So you're basically at the peak. This should be the peak of your running back career at this point, and you tore your Achilles.
Yeah.
And that's a hard injury to come back from. We saw the same amount of time that it took Cam Akers to recover is kind of the same amount of time, not a little bit longer for James Robinson than Cam Akers, but we saw what Cam Akers looked like at the start. And if you have a healthy, energetic, young, fresh, talented running back who's in the backfield dominating and looking great, and another running back who looks like they just came off a torn Achilles, who's going to get the playing time?
Exactly.
Achilles injuries are the worst injury for running backs. I have no concerns about James Robinson. Travis Etienne will get the bulk of the work week 1, even if he splits carry work
He's going to get the receiving
He's
work.
still going to get the receiving work. So Etienne has value in PPR leagues, half PPR leagues, and standard leagues, and I think not only should you have drafted him, but if you didn't get him on your team in the draft, now's your chance to go snag him, because in our draft, 3-2 is where he went. He's typically going mid-4th, so like that's not going to take a whole heck of a lot to get, and for a running back that has the talent that Travis Etienne does and the upside that he does, I would go out and trade for him now before you regret it.
Yeah, especially people that drafted earlier, and they thought, oh, James Robinson's not going to be bad. Like, he's definitely going to start in the PUP. And then Etienne, or I can have Etienne those first couple weeks as like a true workhorse. And then when they hear Robinson's going to play week 1, they might panic trade him. And you could take advantage of that with Etienne, because using Cam Akers is a great example. Akers, what was it, 7 weeks, I think, or 7 months after his torn Achilles? James Robinson would be on 8 months. James Robinson tore his Achilles at the end of last season. So it's close. And in Cam Akers' first game back, he had 5 carries for 3 yards. So this will be James Robinson's first game back in
5
almost
carries
a similar,
for 3 yards.
In a similar time frame. I think he has a 1 month extra on Akers, but still not good. And even in the playoffs, we all know Cam Akers struggled. So James Robinson, I don't expect to do that good. And I don't expect him, especially week 1, to get a lot of work. Even if they feel like James Robinson is, still the quote-unquote starter, or they still feel like they're going to use him a lot, they're not going to give him a lot of work week 1. They're going to ease him into it. And even when he gets that work, as you said, Travis Etienne is going to get the pass catching. So to take advantage of the mess right now, go get Travis Etienne. He's going to get majority of the work week 1. Yeah. He's going to have a good week 1. And everyone who's saying James Robinson's the starting running back is in for a little bit of surprise. Later in the season, like I said, I think Robinson will get eased into it and eventually will have a solid role in the offense. But just because he's playing week 1 doesn't mean he's going to do good.
Yep, I agree. Washington is a tough matchup too, by the way. So there might be a double week window where you could do this if Etienne does not have the best performance. But you're not getting past Indy in week 2 because Indy, for some reason, against running backs is not great for fantasy football.
Interesting.
Which is kind of surprising, in my mind at least.
Yeah, they have a decent defense.
They have a good pass defense. Stephen Gilmore and Kenny Moore. Is that his name? Stop it. Anyway, all right, third and final guy, Allen Robinson. You got to get this guy before Thursday night. Hot off the presses.
Yes, sir.
If you didn't draft him, I mean, I have been all in on Allen Robinson, and I would be absolutely stunned if A-Rob does not have a great week 1. I paced out the numbers in my confirmation that Allen Robinson was a good pick for me last night in my research. Robert Woods, in the 8 games that he played, and mind you, he missed half a game because he got hurt in the game. He was wide receiver 11 or 12, I believe.
I think he was 12. I think we've gone over those numbers before.
Right. So I think that's the role that Allen Robinson is going to play, and I'm not going to lie. Allen Robinson is a more talented and better receiver than Robert Woods. I love you, Robert Woods, but
I would have to agree with you.
So with that being said, I think he's going to command a decent target share. I think he's going to definitely be the number 1 wide receiver. They don't have Odell. Van Jefferson is even, I think there's concerns about him playing week 1 as well. So if those things are true and they come to fruition, and we should probably know that by now because it's Tuesday when we're recording this. Let me just check really quickly.
I think he's questionable. Last check.
Okay. So, but if he doesn't play, that's even more work for Allen Robinson.
Right.
And with that being said, I think this is a matchup on the first night of the season. Defenses are going to be sluggish. Offenses are going to be flying. This is going to be a 35, 40-point performance for both teams. Well, I don't know about Kansas City. We'll see. We'll see what they look like.
You mean Buffalo?
I mean Buffalo. Why do I keep doing that? I've literally, to multiple people, I've said it's Kansas City.
Same team.
Yeah, same team. Anyway. But Buffalo, Buffalo's going to come out. They're going to score a lot of points. The Rams are going to score a lot of points. Allen Robinson is, I think, poised to have a really big week 1. And once he does, that's going to be confirmation for the person that drafted him that Allen Robinson was a good idea. So if you can get him before that happens on Thursday, make it happen.
This is the time to get him. In Sleeper, he's like what, a 5th round pick?
Yeah.
And on ESPN though, he's like a 6th or 7th, and I think Yahoo's same thing. So he's probably not even starting on the team that has him, or he's like in their flex spot.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the time to get him. He's one of our I guess you could say, not a breakout, but comeback players that we have.
Yeah, comeback.
Van Jefferson, as you just said, might not play. Tre'Davious White, the Bills' number 1 corner, is on the PUP list. So all the Bills' secondary attention that is left is going to be focusing on Cooper Kupp, and that is going to leave absolutely
I think one
nobody.
of their safeties, too, Jordan Poirier, is missing time as well.
Is he out, too?
Yeah, I believe so. I could be wrong.
I mean, the Bills' secondary is rough right now, and we all know Cooper Kupp is going to do his thing. But if Van Jefferson doesn't play, and Tre'Davious White is out, like Allen Robinson could realistically see like 8, 9, 10 targets, and he's also going to see a decent red zone targets as well once they get in there. In a high scoring game, it's all positives this week.
Like the question too, in our final bit of speculation here, because we will talk a little bit about Allen Robinson on Thursday's preview show.
Mm-hmm.
But like looking forward into this season, like obviously Cooper Kupp is a decent red zone target for the team, but he's not big bodied. He's not a physical outside receiver that's going to take the ball away from you. And that's kind of the style of receiver that Allen Robinson is. So, like, I feel like the target when they get into the red zone is going to be Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, obviously he's going to look for Kupp, I think.
But this is it. Like, you have, when we post this on Wednesday and Thursday to make this trade.
Oh yeah, you don't have a huge time limit here, but go get him.
You got to make it happen. Because after this week, it's going to be pretty much impossible to get him off whatever team.
If he gets 20 points this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident about that.
That he's getting 20?
No, I'm pretty confident about the fact that he's going to have a good week.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about 20, dude.
I think he's good for 15 to 20.
Yeah. So I definitely love Allen Robinson, but there's your first week 1 content. Breaking it down. We have a Thursday night preview show. We're only doing 3 shows this week, so we got a Thursday night preview show coming up next before Thursday Night Football, and then starts and sits as we go into week 1 and the full slate of games on Sunday. Really excited. Get all these players before week 1 is over. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.